Welcome to Lesson 4 in our study of the Gospel of John. The reading amount you should have prepared for today was John chapter 11, verse 1 through 12, verse 50. The central verse I'd like you to kind of center your reflection around is 11:51 through 52. He did not say this on his own, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was about to die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but to gather into one the dispersed children of God. So that is again John 11:51 through 52. Now when I pull out a central verse, usually that, especially since these are such big chapter sections, that's the verse I choose to kind of reflect around and focal point on. That's not to say that in your own personal reading some other verse didn't jump out at you. And when you break into your smaller groups, I would really like you to discuss what jumps out at you every week. Because what speaks to you may be different than what speaks to me. But here's the truth in a statement like the one we just read, that God often uses imperfect and even conniving individuals or vessels to speak and complete the work of Jesus. This is true today, that we often find God working through us, and we know how imperfect we are. Often, political leaders do not make decisions that are best for their people. I'm saying that statement right now knowing there is a lot of unrest in our world today. And this was no different now than it is back then. Political leaders vie for an issue or a position because it gains popularity for themselves or their side. It doesn't matter whether it's the right thing or not. In Jesus' day, we have the ruling class, which are the Sadducees, and they are placed alongside the Pharisees. The Pharisees tended to be people who were kind of the working class pastors. They were the people who spent time, they were the pastors. They weren't the priests typically that you would see in the temple. The Sadducees tended to do everything they could to support the Roman Empire and Roman rule. And there was power to be had in these positions. Jesus is a threat to their power. Caiaphas, the high priest, hid all his malicious intent in this idea that one person dying is better than harm to the rest of the nation. And in a way that's true. We just know that because we're on the other side of the story, that Caiaphas' word has a double meaning. And John himself points this out. So that's one of the hard parts of reading a gospel, is we get the behind the scenes stuff often said when most people wouldn't have that. John helps us to understand that Jesus' death is salvation for all. Often people are concerned with their own wealth and their own position, and they don't think about the nature of their actions, and whether those actions are something that God wants them to do or doesn't want them to do. This is not an excuse for us to not act, or even to not act in our own interest. It's a statement of reality of our existence. As Christians, of course, we should be always looking to what God would have us do. God always uses imperfect vessels to complete God's goals. Some little food for thought for you to take in on this in this conversation. There's some oddity about how John talks about the high priest, because the office of high priest was intended to be a lifelong position. And John seems to remark that Caiaphas was only in his office shortly before being removed. That may have been a result of Roman rule and the way the Romans decided to dictate how the Jewish people would pass on that title or position. But one thing that is without a doubt happening here is a strong marriage of political wisdom and practicality from Caiaphas's position. Caiaphas knew that there was a precarious setup between the Roman government and the Jewish people. And while his wisdom might have been sound politically, it was not sound as far as what God was trying to accomplish. So I would like you to take some time in your group discussions to talk about where do you see that lining up. You may want to talk about it in the actual political sense. And I want to discourage you from picking on any one political leader and try to approach this from a faith-based orientation, to look at where any political leader might line up or might not, and why. You are going to disagree about this, so I ask that you disagree respectfully as you converse about it. Also, of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of this lesson, talk about some of the things that may have jumped out at you through the week from this selection of reading. I know that God tends to speak to each of us differently based on where we're at. So take your time to do that and enjoy your time together.